I think we are good to get rolling here this morning. Hi, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. It's morning here in New York, afternoon where you are, likely. Mark Zagorski, CEO of DoubleVerify. It's awesome to be here today. Want to start by welcoming everyone to our 2021 Global Insights Report webinar for the EMEA region. As you may know, DV's mission is to make the advertising ecosystem stronger, safer, and more secure. And a big part of doing that is about being transparency, not just with the data that we share, but the thought leadership that we bring to the table. And that's why we're here today. Our Global Insight Reports is one of the key cornerstones of our thought leadership in the industry. We've helped provide advertisers with in-depth market by market analysis spanning North America, LATAM, EMEA, APAC, to help inform your digital advertising strategies. It's the 5th year we've published a report, and it's become more robust every year. Our analytics team, headed by Colette Spagnolo, who will be joining us today, who is our Senior Director of Market Analytics. They've looked at media quality and performance trends for more than 1 trillion impressions delivered in 80 markets across 2,100 brands. This is no sample, folks. This is the real thing, and we've got some great data to share with you today. Our focus today is obviously the EMEA region, which covers 43 countries, and the top 14 of which are included in our market-by-market benchmarks. Colette's going to take us through the findings of the report with specific insights from the EMEA region. And a short presentation will be followed by a really exciting fireside chat, also moderated by Colette. And for the fireside chat, we're really lucky to have some great panelists with us today. First off is Daniel Knapp, Chief Economist of IAB Europe, and Stevan Rangelovic, who's the Director of Brand Safety and Digital Risk at GroupM EMEA. I couldn't imagine 2 better people to have on the phone with us today, or on Zoom with us today. A quick update on Daniel Knapp. Daniel is an advertising and media analyst with more than 15 years of international experience, having served in leadership roles spanning market analysis, strategic advisory, and business intelligence. He's got a great amount of market experience in the space and brings tremendous value to the digital advertising community through his role at the IAB. And Stevan, who's Director of Brand Safety and Digital Risk at GroupM and EMEA, supports GroupM's digital operations in EMEA by looking after all areas of digital risk, which we know there are many, and underpinning media quality processes and governance. His expertise with challenging issues such as privacy, consumer protection are critical in helping support not only his clients, but the digital ad agency as well. With that, Colette, I'm going to pass it to you to take us through some of the findings.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. I'm also really, really excited for this webinar today. So as a quick reminder before I jump in, for the audience, you can ask questions as we go through this presentation and also the fireside chat in the Q&A box. So please enter your questions. We do have some time set aside at the very end for Q&A from the audience. But with that, let's jump in. So before we review EMEA trends, let's take a look at the global state of quality over the past 12 months. Overall, DV has found that many of the post-bid quality metrics that we measure and benchmark are moving in a positive direction. Violation rates are decreasing, which you can see on the left-hand side of the slide. Both brand suitability and fraud violations are down globally, which demonstrates the impact that verification technologies are having on cleaning up the supply chain. Now, it's important to note, especially for EMEA, that these violation figures are all post-bid. So open marketplace numbers that have not gone through pre-bid avoidance technology are certainly higher. But it's not just brand suitability and fraud violations that are improving. Globally, viewability is up as well, driven not only by mature markets, such as North America, but also emerging market improvements year over year. EMEA, however, was a bit of an outlier in this year's report. And you'll see in the upcoming slides that the state of quality is improving in EMEA, but not quite at the same rate that we're seeing in other regions. And we'll get into why this happened as we talk through the regional trends. One more note that's really important. This report covers post-bid quality data across open web inventory. So this does not include social media or YouTube. So a really important underlying driver of the improvement that we have seen globally has been a convergence of programmatic and publisher direct quality. For years, the industry has been saying that programmatic advertising has matured and spend is up across programmatic. But programmatic maturity is not just reflected in spend or in reach. So for the first time ever, DoubleVerify's fraud and brand suitability violation rates for programmatic and publisher direct buys came within 1% of each other. Just a year ago, programmatic's brand suitability violation rate was 15% higher than publisher direct, and its fraud rate was 5% higher too. And viewable rates are now comparable across programmatic and publisher direct buys. So why is this happening? Well, publisher and programmatic buys used to be strongly delineated. So programmatic meant real-time bidding with an open exchange, and publisher meant filling out insertion orders with each publisher on your media plan. But today, private marketplaces and programmatic guarantee deals add flexibility to buys, and that blurs the line between programmatic and publisher direct. It's possible to now buy from publishers programmatically. So it is not surprising that as that line blurs, the quality is converging as well. And as programmatic continues to grow as the dominant buying modality, global advertisers are increasingly activating pre-bid controls. So they are benefiting from protection before ads are even purchased. And this prevents post-bid violations in real-time bidding environments. Also, of course, platforms such as DSPs and SSPs have worked diligently with the verification industry to improve inventory quality at large. So taking a look at video specifically, we're seeing some really big changes here. Connected TV has emerged as the top driver of video impressions in North America across all the different device types. And mobile web video volume more than doubled globally year over year. One of the biggest trends worth noting here is the shift in content consumption. During the pandemic, of course, people began increasing the time they spent online, and in particular, the time that they spent streaming content. But not only are more people streaming content, DV is also better able to measure video content. Within CTV, standard measurement is just not applicable, but we've taken strides to ensure that our DoubleVerify tag can be used to measure impressions on CTV by working closely with the leading platforms. On the mobile side, the Open Measurement Initiative with the IAB has also improved measurability drastically. So historically, video has been especially difficult to measure within the mobile app environment, but strong adoption of the Open Measurement Software Development Kit, or OMSDK as you might know it, has really helped gradually reverse this trend. As of Q1 of this year, for example, DV saw over 100,000 open measurement enabled apps in the ecosystem. So the share of video impressions that support viewability measurement increased by about 10% year over year. What does this all mean? Greater adoption has led to better measurability. So zooming in and taking a look specifically at EMEA now, at quality metrics. So we can see that overall quality is improving, but not quite at the same rate as in other regions. 2020 was, of course, a transformative year in many ways, not the least of which was the coronavirus pandemic. And at the beginning of the pandemic, many advertisers globally responded by broadly blocking any content that they felt could be potentially unsafe or unsuitable. In other regions, we therefore saw brand suitability violations jump from 2019 to 2020 accordingly. But in EMEA, we saw violations decrease actually from 2019 to 2020, and then it remained stable from 20 to 21. And EMEA overall, because of this trend, is now above the global benchmark for brand suitability violations. But it's important to remember that EMEA is not a monolith. So each country behaves very differently. And although that regional trend remained flat year over year, brand suitability violations in the UK and Italy, for example, decreased by 10% and 15% respectively. Violations increased by 8% in Germany and 29% in France, which now has the highest brand suitability violation rate in Western Europe. And among markets even newer to verification best practices, including Turkey, Switzerland, and the UAE, we observed big increases in brand suitability violations as well over the last year. And now roughly 1 out of every 5 impressions in these countries serves on unsuitable content. But as each market matures in verification, we do expect these rates to improve over time and impact the regional rate. Moving on to fraud. So although fraud rates declined by 19% year over year across EMEA, fraud is actually above the 1.4% global post-bid benchmark. So fraud and sophisticated invalid traffic, or SIVT, in EMEA is largely driven by data center traffic and site fraud. The good news is that both app fraud and bot fraud are down across the region, and now we're at just 3% and 2% of fraud violations, respectively. And when we look at the 3-year trend, we can see that post-bid fraud has been on a sustained decline. And this decline shows that impact of pre-bid fraud avoidance and protection. And again, these rates are all post-bid. On to viewability. With 64% of display impressions now viewable, display is making strides in EMEA in reaching that 70% IAB recommended viewability threshold, and it increased by 7% year over year. Video viewability increased for all regions except EMEA, where it did decrease slightly by 3%. But context is important here. EMEA has still the second strongest video viewable rate across all our regions. And at 75% viewable, EMEA remains above that 70% recommended IAB threshold. 2/3 of video impressions now serve on mobile devices in EMEA across mobile app and mobile web, as measured by DV's universe. Mobile app in particular increased its share of verified video impressions from 17% to 23% year over year across all video impressions. Again, measurement has improved due in large part to the increased adoption of the open measurement SDK, and that did contribute to this trend. At the same time that mobile app impression share increased, we saw a decline in mobile app video viewability by 8% year over year. This decline does help explain the slight downward trend in overall video viewable rates across EMEA, but again, context important, at 75% across all devices, EMEA is still outperforming our global video average. Of course, video and viewable rates on their own can be a little misleading. So DV pioneered the authentic ad, an MRC accredited metric in 2015. If you're not familiar, to be considered authentic, an ad must be viewable, free of fraud, serve in a brand safe environment, and in the intended geography. It's really important never to look at quality in a silo where metrics are separate from each other. And when we work with larger brands, they often use the authentic ad as their currency for quality. Now, DV's position is that 70% IAB threshold should not only be for viewable ads, 70% should be the threshold for authentic ads. If you don't have quality across all key metrics, you're potentially paying for lower quality media. Having a strong baseline of quality puts you in a better position to achieve performance KPIs, whether that's on branding or direct response campaigns. So when we look at authentic rates in EMEA specifically, we could see the trend continue, where display rates are still improving, but video rates are leveling off. In 2019, video had a 63% authentic rate. In 2020, this jumped to 70%, and over the past year, video authentic rate declined a modest 1%, which essentially is remaining stable and really close to that 70% threshold. But on display, the authentic rate, like the viewable rate, rose by 9% as EMEA continues to climb towards that 70% threshold. So let's pull all of this together. For the first year ever, DV saw quality in each region, APAC, EMEA, LATAM, and North America all improve. But the biggest improvements were seen in emerging markets, APAC and LATAM. Now, this is a clear reversal from last year's Global Insights report, but it was an expected trend because we have seen these regions mature. And as emerging markets grow in their understanding and adoption of tools across brand suitability, fraud, and viewability, we see that their rates are starting to align with the levels that we see in more mature markets. So industry education about best practices, such as pre-bid avoidance, are driving improvement around the globe. And as emerging markets are catching up, mature markets such as Western Europe and the UK should be mindful to maintain high quality standards. In North America in particular, 2020 spurred an increased focus on brand suitability and other quality standards, which we did not see happen across all EMEA markets. But remaining vigilant and establishing that baseline of quality will help ensure that advertisers in EMEA have the ability to see what drives performance, and it ensures that you're spending your media budget in the most efficient and effective way. So enough of me talking. Let's get into our fireside chat with Stefan, Daniel, and Mark. We'll also be launching some polls throughout the fireside chat and reviewing the results live, so take a look out for that as well. So let's start with an understanding of macro trends and the ad verification landscape in EMEA. Daniel, we'll start with you. So we saw that 74% of media buys in EMEA were programmatic over the last year, and the region actually leads APAC and the Americas in terms of programmatic share of video. So based on this, do you think that trust has grown in EMEA when it comes to programmatic buying versus direct buying?
We also see this trend of markets being programmatic first in our IAB Europe AdX benchmark study, which looks at the revenue perspective. So we can see programmatic is a key ingredient of media buying today. I think the trust debate has really shifted. So the short answer to your question would be yes, trust has grown. If we look at the beginning of programmatic, there was massive uncertainty whether both advertisers and publishers should actually transact programmatically at all, right? For publishers, it was about loss of control over inventory, loss of pricing. For advertisers, it was about being unclear about the mechanics of programmatic advertising. So in that sense, a major trust issue has been resolved, but trust has shifted. So it's not about whether we do programmatic or not, but trust is now a key challenge inside the programmatic world. And it has really kind of many more facets and fragments, right? There's the issue of supply chain transparency. There is disinformation slash misinformation. Then there are the things you highlighted around viewability and fraud. So the debate has really shifted. And I don't think it's a judgment on programmatic to say trust is still a concern. Rather, I'd equate this to other industries that are maturing rapidly, right? Think of the automotive industry and the shift from fossil fuels to electricity, to fair trade supply chains in the fashion industry, in the FMCG coffee industry, and so forth. Trust levels vary a lot now. So you can see that sophisticated buyers and sellers have a higher trust just because they are more proactive and programmatic. They feel they have more levers of control. So I would say to all of those who are concerned about trust in programmatic, solving this issue is not taking a backseat, but proactively trying to control the variables in programmatic to make it work for you.
Yeah, so Stefan, what are you seeing? Are you beginning to see a shift to more programmatic buys, specifically in video, if you could speak to that? And what implications do you think that this is having on advertisers in the region?
First of all, thank you for the insightful presentation. I'll be taking notes while you were speaking. Yes, we are definitely seeing an increase in programmatic video buys, and especially because as the pandemic kicked in, and I know lots of people are speaking about pandemics as the reason for everything, but really as people stayed more at home, they were more focused on consuming good content, and obviously advertisers flocked to it. I think there are many implications, but for within the context of my job, right, brand safe digital risk, the main implication is trying to mitigate that risk within those confines of, as Daniel was saying, within the walls of trust, if you like. And the issue here is that we're speaking about video, but video can mean anything. It can mean native video, YouTube, connected TV, even YouTube you can buy on connected TV. It's just like lots of different caveats. So speaking of that, I think the implications are there are still some concerns about transparency, about fraud, specifically, but again, there are some latest advancement in this particular area to help us through. And I do agree that Open Measurement SDK, OM SDK, or VAS standards have helped raise that bar. But unfortunately, in Europe, we are still lagging behind when it comes to adoption of those standards. So not everything is always measurable. So if I had one message to the European markets, please, please, please adopt more open OM SDK and VAS standards. And I think GroupM agencies and all agencies are actually pushing the markets to do more with regards to this.
Yeah, for sure. And we're going to jump into some of those more macro trends throughout our conversation. So we're going to launch our first poll here, and this is for the audience. It's about how drastically you have had to pivot your brand safety and suitability strategy during this past year. So you can answer this as we're talking through the brand suitability section. So Mark, although EMEA's overall brand suitability trend, as I stated earlier, was consistent year over year, we did see countries across the region with large fluctuations. But let's start with some definitions here. What is the difference between brand safety and brand suitability, and why is that important? Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, see, you can't have one of these without one being on mute. I do want to comment on something that Esteban just said, which is, we blame everything on the pandemic. I had a full head of hair before the pandemic. It was luxurious and long. And now look, this is what it did. So yes, you can blame everything on the pandemic. But let's back to the subject here today. When we talk about brand safety and suitability, I mean, they are truly defined as different specific things. And these aren't kind of just kind of flavors of the same thing. They are technical definitions. So when we think of brand safety is defined as literally a black and white line between content that almost all advertisers want nothing to do with. So this is things like pornography or terrorism or hate speech. These are areas in which no advertiser and no legitimate advertiser would want content to be. Brand suitability, however, is definitely a more nuanced concept. And think of brand suitability more of content that may be appropriate for one brand because of who they are, what they stand for, may not be suitable for another brand. The content is certainly safe, but not suitable. So think of an example, stories around, a high increase in seasonal allergies, right? If you're a gardening provider or someone who provides, gardening tools, that's the last place you would want to be. It's not suitable for you because you don't want to be talking about allergies or people are going outside. But if you sell home furnishings or cars, stories about allergies are perfectly fine. So I think, one of the things that came out of COVID, which we can point to as a blame, was a better understanding of content that may not be comfortable, but is certainly suitable versus content that is no longer safe. And we've spent a lot of time at DV focused on, helping define those nuances for our clients. And I think clients, as we started this conversation, have become much more sophisticated around how they approach brand safety versus brand suitability.
Evan, are you seeing this? Are brands that you are working with making that distinction between brand safety and suitability as they develop media strategies? And if you are seeing that, how is that impacting their campaigns?
Yes, we are definitely seeing that. And we're seeing that mostly because if we were to apply the brand safety definition to everything, the scale would so drastically drop. And that's when brands started thinking about the suitability tiers. Am I a low risk client? Am I a medium risk client? And the GARM framework, which we'll speak a bit about later on, really helped that. In terms of the impact, I do think one is that when brands determined those suitability tiers, low, medium, and high, the impact was definitely on scale because they were able and they are able to monetize more news, for example, even more DNI publishers. But also we are seeing easier activation across channels and easier integration of different controls across channels and across devices, etc. Simply because, you know, once when you've established one definition globally, it's just a smoother process, if you like.
Yeah, Daniel, how do you think that that GARM and 4A's brand suitability floor and suitability framework that Stevan was just talking about, how do you think that that will impact the media landscape looking kind of to the future?
Well, I think first it's very clear that it comes at a very important point. We saw in 2020, as we moved into the pandemic, and there was a lot of negative sentiment around the news, an extremely conservative approach from many advertisers who were applying binary blacklists. But I think soon they realized that things are more nuanced and that a negative story might not necessarily be a negative brand experience for somebody. So what is this GARM framework? I think first we need to ascertain that we really have a problem of language in media. We use a lot of terms in advertising, but they're ill-defined, right? So even what is programmatic advertising? When I do my study at the IAB, there are 27 countries and there are at least 28 different definitions, right? So when we speak about harmful content or risk, what is that? And there's so much subjectivity in there. People use their own experience. They use lay psychological or lay sociological assumptions of what that is. It's influenced by the cultural context that they're in. So, but overall, it's very subjective. And there's a lack of measurable and instructive criteria on how that's going to look like. So what this brand safety floor and suitability framework has really done at first is the objective is to reduce the availability and monetization of harmful content. And it starts with a common definition. What is harmful, right? And there are some very strict in binary categories, but to Stefan's point earlier, there are also nuances, high risk, medium risk, and low risk, which now for the first time allow brands to link their ad strategy to kind of a tiered level of risk exposure, which is standardized. It's standardized across countries and different vendors can adopt it. That means that these subjective concepts of risk, of harm that we previously not only are defined, but they can now be translated into KPIs and into strategies. So that's very, very important. I would say to the last bit of your questions, how is that going to affect the media landscape going forward? Well, we know standards and definitions are one thing. Adoption of standards is an entirely different beast. And we're in the EMEA region. You said how many 40 plus markets in there, all different markets, different languages, different trading conventions, also with different local standards, which might compete, right? So I think it's very important to see we can only reduce harmful content in media if we have a scaled and standardized approach. That might not be a one size fits all, but it's very important, I think, to look at these global standards and see how can we translate that into local strategies instead of just saying we stick with our local things. So I monitor very closely how adoption is going because standards don't implement themselves automatically.
No, they don't. We could tell you that at DV. You make it sound a little easier than it is, but I'm just kidding. So Mark, let's dig into some of those fluctuations within the region. So I'll repeat some of the information I relayed earlier. Brand suitability violation rates in the UK and Italy, we saw decreases of 10% and 15% respectively. We saw brand suitability violation rates increase, though, in Germany by 8% and in France by 29%. And we saw big increases in Turkey, Switzerland, and the UAE. So can you speak to why you believe we're seeing some of these fluctuations in EMEA?
Yeah, I mean, first off, just playing off what Daniel said, we're looking at a very diverse set of countries and markets. It's not EMEA. We talk about EMEA like it's one thing. It's very, very different. And I actually heard something the other day, and hopefully it's not too offensive, but it's a funny saying. It's like, in heaven, the French deliver the French make the food, the English make the laws, and the Germans run the trains. And in hell, the English make the food, the Germans make the laws, and the French run the trains. So there's your, we're working at different universes. I'm sure that offended everybody on the phone. So that's great. So that's
where are the Americans, Mark?
That's not brand safe. Oh, we are in our own category of hell. But anyways, when we look at these markets, some are more mature and some are emerging, right? That's the interesting thing when we look, when we're defining a specific region, and not only are they, different and emerging, in a whole for digital, they're different emerging on different types of platforms too. CTV has a different position in the UK versus in France. Some of it has to do with local laws. Some of it has to do with how businesses are set up in each region, et cetera. So, I think in mature markets, we're going to see, rates continue to decline, particularly as we see pre-bid programmatic solutions come into play. What we've seen in our research is that as more advertisers use pre-bid filtering, we see a decline. So think of they're inversely related, a decline in the number of post-bid violations. Just makes sense. If you're filtering out bad impressions before you even bid on them, the post-bid numbers are going to look much better. So as markets mature, as programmatic pre-bid filtering continues to grow in market by market, we'll see less violations. And then again, playing off what Daniel said, as marketers become more savvy around the difference between brand safety and suitability, the ability to be more nuanced and be more definitive on what is safe versus what is suitable will actually start driving the numbers down as well, because advertisers are just becoming more active in this. Their clients are becoming, their constituents are becoming more engaged in the process. So the level of sophistication just grows. The level of sophistication per sector, whether it's mobile or CTV or display, all changes from market to market. But I do feel like we're coming to a convergent point where, whether you're an advertiser in an emerging market, such as in some of the markets in the Middle East, or you're an advertiser in a much more mature market, your concerns are generally the same, is that you want the highest performance from your advertising. And the way to drive the highest performance is to get the junk out first and then refine from there, because the better environment that you can create for an ad, the more opportunity you have for that ad to actually work.
Can I just quickly jump in there, Mark? I think that there was a very important point you said about refining. When I think about the GARM framework, I think one thing that's kind of often overlooked is the ability of experimentation that it offers. I remember at the beginning of my research career, I was tasked by several publishers to find out through an empirical study what the correlation is between the quality of a content and the reception of an ad. And it was very, very hard to do. And we struggled, and we had to turn down time and again these kind of requests because we didn't have the data. What we have now, in particular in this post-cookie environment, everybody needs to redefine the rule book. And a lot will be a test, learn, adapt framework. And if we have these different risk exposure categories, to your point about driving maximum value, brands can now see through the feedback loop they have established in programmatic which risk category really works for them. So they don't have to define a priori and stick with it, but they can actually dynamically tune that and find their own risk recipe. That's probably the thing that excites me most about it, because it means that kind of for the first time now, the programmatic infrastructure, buying, feedback loop, clear KPIs, and this more elusive notion of risk are kind of all coming together in a potential optimization paradigm.
Yeah, super interesting. And I'll actually share results of the poll, because I think this also speaks to some of the differences that we saw in EMEA in terms of the trends here versus the other regions. So you see that about almost half of respondents said that they've only moderately had to change their suitability strategy during the past year. 14% said no changes were made, and another 11% said that they're not applying brand suitability controls. And our
terrible. What's wrong with these people?
Yeah, and if you, we had 2 earlier webinars with APAC and the Americas as well, and the responses to this question in particular were so different. Most people did respond that they significantly had to change, or at least moderately. So I think that's pretty interesting. Steven, let's talk to some of those specific challenges, especially within the region. What are you hearing from marketers? What are the challenges that they're facing when they're trying to apply brand safety and suitability, especially within, multi-channel media buys, which is becoming more of the norm, and anything specific to the region that you think, is worthy of highlighting?
One challenge I'd highlight is the uniform activation across all channels and devices. I've spoken before that, GAN framework in principle should make it easier, but as the adoption is not there yet, it is challenging for, in the ideal world, the client would say, yes, I'm medium risk in those categories, low risk in those categories, go. But because the GAN framework is not applied everywhere, I know the DV does have it applied on open web, and recently have announced the YouTube and I think Facebook. So that's really a great advancement, but we definitely more. The second challenge is that app brand safety still relies quite a lot on app description, and I do know again that DV has made some strides in there with some I think it's called enhanced app authoring. The third challenge, really particular to the EMEA, which I don't think many people understand or appreciate, is the language. In EMEA, there are many languages. I don't even know the count in the EU. I think there are 23 official languages. On top of that, there are dialects, etc., etc., etc. So that's really a big challenge. And the final one is video and audio analysis. We really, as the industry, we must do better to analyze better video, not metadata, but the video frame by frame and audio within. And then if you like, there are new social platforms that add on top an overlay of the text, which also has to be analyzed. So some of the challenges, sorry, you asked, I said.
There are a lot, I know. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about fraud, everyone's favorite topic. So as I mentioned earlier, in EMEA, we saw that the post-bid fraud, and that does include all types of sophisticated invalid traffic. So the rate decreased by 19% year over year, but we're still seeing that EMEA persistently has the highest post-bid fraud rate globally. So Mark, we did see a decline year over year. Can you talk to why we're continuing to see this decline over the last 3 years, actually?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few main reasons. The first is one I referred to earlier, as programmatic continues to become a bigger and bigger factor in buying across all media types. I think pre-bid filtering certainly has a definite relationship to the post-bid, violation rates. So, adding that layer of filtering certainly helps. I think also we have to give some credit and some kudos to the supply side platforms and the aggregators who, driven mainly by supply path optimization, have done a much better job cleaning up inventory, right? I think the days of, hey, let's throw things against the wall and see if it sticks, and let's try to find the cheapest impression. I think advertisers have been burned one too many times by that, and platforms and SSPs have learned that trying to make an extra point in margin by getting a cheaper impression and pushing it through as something that's good will eventually come to bite them in the butt. So I think it's been a combination of pre-bid filtering, a combination of better vetting of inventory driven by supply path optimization, and a general cleanup of the pipes. Not saying that by any means it's cleaned everything up, and we've seen increases in fraud across high value venues like connected television, et cetera. But things are getting better.
So Daniel, are you seeing that things are getting better? And what across the industry are some initiatives being undertaken to help combat ad fraud? And I would love if you can also speak to what impact you think individual advertisers and publishers can actually have in keeping the full ecosystem free of these bad actors.
So we at IAB Europe, we do kind of 3 things in this domain. We create awareness among our members that that fraud, bad actors are an issue that need to be combated both at the SSP, the DSP level, but also at the advertiser and the publisher level. We can provide a compass of solutions because there are many fragmented solutions, right? There are different standards and different, usually pushed by different national IABs. We work together, for instance, there are some great national kind of champion approaches in the UK, for instance, or in Poland, which really do stand out. And we enable other national IABs to implement those champions so that we can moving towards a pan-European approach. That kind of means also, thirdly, we're going to have this forum for industry alignment on debates. What can companies do, in particular publishers and advertisers? I think publishers are uniquely positioned in two ways. Number one, there's the journalistic aspect of it. They can talk about it publicly. Publishers have a great forum, and they do that often when you think about the kind of the demise of their own business model. Many industries are affected, but I think none is so much in the public mind as the kind of demise of the publisher, because they kind of control the narrative. But publishers can do more things, in particular on the advertising side, and I see ad ops teams becoming much smarter, which is about ad ops teams working closer with corporate to see which advertisers should we actually let on our page. So there is overall, in particular with premium publishers, a move to reducing the number of advertisers and building stronger ties either via agencies or with direct clients. And you can also see that when you look at, on the agency side, kind of partnerships with certain SSPs or directly with publishers. So an entire kind of compression of the programmatic supply chain that we've seen in the past with more direct point-to-point connections. We also see this with not just the walled garden, but also the creation of hedged gardens, right? With only certain vendors, certain publishers coming together in alliances to provide a clean, scaled environment. For advertisers, it's similar, picking the partners, but it's also, as they control the budgets, of course, they can exert much more pressure on their partners. And I believe, particularly as they have smartened up with in-housing, for instance, taking DSP contracts in-house, that created really good foundations to probe more what's going on. And I agree, lastly, with Mark's point that the margin chasing of some of the intermediaries, which has characterized advertising in the past, programmatic, that time's over. There's a macro social debate, there's a regulatory debate, and there's now also advertisers on the basis of this voting with their money, meaning that you need to stand out as a clean vendor in this space to continue to attract budgets.
Yeah, definitely. Shifting gears a little bit, we're going to talk about viewability. And our next poll will be going live shortly, which is just asking about what role viewability plays in your overall media strategy. So as you're answering that, my first question in this section is back to you, Daniel. We did see that video viewability decreased slightly in EMEA, which did make EMEA an outlier in a year where we did see every other region realize some improvements. Can you talk to the expectations that you're hearing from advertisers in the region? What expectations do they have around viewability?
So 2 years ago, it was a vast range. You had some, advertisers, particularly very premium brands with very, very high standards of viewability, in particular those who were late to programmatic, who came out of a direct world and tried to apply those same principles to programmatic. And I think your presentation showed before that the standards were lower in programmatic, but this has now been aligned. Other advertisers didn't really have these viewability standards. But what I see across the region and my expertise in this, speaking with advertisers, in particular in the UK, in Germany, and in France, that viewability standards align on very high levels. However, there is one striking difference between advertisers. Some take viewability data at face value, and others probe into the data. And I think that's really where the difference is. It's very important. For some advertisers, viewability still is a box-ticking exercise, right? It's like you never got fired for hiring IBM, right? As soon as the metric is there, fine, problem resolved. You can show it to your CMO, you can show it to someone else in the organization and say, look, everything's wonderful, everything's squeaky clean. But others are probing it and saying, no, we need to have better standards on what is viewable. How long is something in the view? Are the IAB minimum threshold standards, are they enough Do we need to do more? Can we trust the report that our vendors are providing? And this is really a much more proactive approach to viewability, which I think separates the leaders from the laggards.
Yeah, and I'll end the poll and quickly share it because I think it's really relevant. Certainly a lot of our respondents did say that viewability plays a huge part, but to your point, beyond viewability, what role do additional metrics when you probe into that, such as time in view and audibility, other exposure and engagement indicators play? So Stefan, if you could speak to that, how are advertisers, looking at these additional metrics when they are optimizing their campaigns? Because viewability is a baseline, right? And DV considers it a part of quality, right?
Yeah, well, that will really depend on the advertiser, right? Some advertisers are really focused only on viewability, and it really matters to them. And I do agree with you that it is a baseline, but we have to recognize, there is not one size fits all when it comes to viewability or brand safety or risk or quality when it comes to that. However, more and more we are seeing, and I'm very pleased by this development because that's what we at GroupM we have been speaking about for a while now, is that viewability is only a part of the quality metric, and quality metric does not stand alone. It's not only viewability, brand safety, fraud, etc. It is really there are really those additional metrics, as you mentioned, which are attention, engagement driven metrics, and etc. So to answer your question, yes, we are seeing more and more of it looking beyond viewability to have that holistic approach for quality.
Yeah, so we'd be remiss if we didn't address stricter data privacy regulations and, of course, the eventual deprecation of third-party cookies, which we got a little reprieve on as an industry, but of course is still super important, especially in this region. So Stefan, my first question about this is to you. Are advertisers in the region actively exploring new approaches to targeting that don't rely on cookies? And if you could speak to some of the solutions that you're hearing from advertisers that are being explored, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll actually give you an anecdote, which I think just a little story from my daily work. Last year in April or even earlier, I think I've done a contextual targeting RFI. That has been the most sought after piece of my work ever since, because advertisers, our agencies are really into the contextual now, because context is more and more seen as a proxy for interest, for audience interest. And apart from that, I've seen quite a lot of people speaking about, clean rooms, integration with first-party data. But again, I'm speaking from a bit of a privileged point of view, meaning that, at GroupM, we really work with the largest of the largest, who have who have access to those solutions. But I'd say for others, really the contextual is something that is being explored very much. Not only contextual, but the interaction with brand safety and suitability, because they come hand in hand, and many people forget that and they put it aside. It's not the same, but they come always together.
Yeah. So Mark, Stefan said it. Contextual targeting is one of the big potential solutions that advertisers are exploring. To be able to target audiences and not rely on that PII, right? So is context back?
Oh, it's back. You thought it died in 2015, but it's reemerged, and it's the hottest thing out there. And it's really interesting because contextual targeting never really went away, right? I think it lost flavor when the whole world swung so heavily into audience-based targeting, right? Which was like, I now can get the exact person I want and I can reach them and I have an identifier against them. But I think, really savvy marketers started finding was that, context matters. If I find the right person, but they're engaged in something that has nothing to do with, their interest in wanting to buy my product. So, I'm trying to sell a car and they're reading an article about, raising a toddler, right? Those two things. Oh, like I got the exact right person. It's a 25-year-old. He's got the right money. He's got the right demographic profile, but he's reading about how to change diapers, right? That context has never been good to try to sell a new car to somebody, right? Especially a dad who's like, oh, it's the last thing I want to think about is me being free in a car again. So I think that smart advertisers have always known that context plays a big role in not just targeting, but in actually the efficacy of impressions as well. So we're seeing this rebalancing back, I think, where context now is playing a bigger role because it's being forced by the lack of identifiers and the privacy concerns around, cookies. And I think it's a good thing. There's a reason why, beer companies show ads during sports because, the context works and there's an overlap of demographics. It's never been perfect because, the audience isn't a perfect match, but there's a great context there. And I think that's where we're heading towards, context has also become in the digital world much more sophisticated, right? It's no longer just, hey, sports content, men, beer, right? Now it can be much more sophisticated, right? There's a deeper understanding of the true meaning of context, right? Because an article about sports and an article about drug abuse in sports are two different types of articles, right? And the ability to kind of pull out those phrases and words to map them to IAB categories that are much more defined and to overlap some level of behavioral or seasonal or dynamic categorization has made contextual targeting, I think, much, much more valuable than it has been in the past. So I'd say the trend is there for sure. I think as with everything, moderation and balance. So a move back towards the center, which is let's use a combination of tactics, not just contextual, but a much more refined contextual plus some level of behavioral together is really where advertisers are heading. And again, what everyone wants is we're focused on performance and outcomes, right? And trying to do so in the safest way possible. And I think contextual targeting and contextual targeting plays a big part of that.
And to Stefan's point, of course, contextual and brand suitability are closely linked, and that's part of why we can leverage our same semantic science technology in that environment. So as we wrap up our fireside chat, we're going to show our last poll, which is for the audience to tell us what they think the dominating trend will be in digital advertising over the next year and a half. So this question will be to all, but we're going to start with you, Stefan. So as we make our way out, hopefully, out of the COVID-19 pandemic, how's the industry going to evolve in the coming year, and what changes from the last year and a half or so do you think are here to stay?
I think we will see more video and in-app spend, and that will definitely stay. And I'd say we'll see we are already seeing more investment into emerging channels such as gaming in particular, audio, and then obviously some social platforms such as TikTok or Twitch. And the final thing I'd say is, we all speak about walled gardens in the context of maybe 2 or 3, 4 companies, but this concept is just being expanded into all realms of the advertising industry, including audio space, for example. So that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, Daniel, what about you? What's in your crystal ball, if you will?
I think Stefan has done very many trends already. I think new things are coming as well. For instance, retail media as new publishers are coming. I think we're going to see an increased focus on the supply chain transparency, on concepts that bring kind of a MarTech and AdTech closer together to facilitate outcome-based marketing. But the fundamental point is this. There's going to be a part of the industry that is going to incrementally change very slowly. Trying to ignore the big macro shifts that are coming our way and try to do business as usual. But others will realize that probably in 2021, we in the last year of the old paradigm. That afterwards, a lot of things that have made digital marketing work or not work, depending on how you define it, a lot of those things will change. So companies will need to unlearn things, unlearn how they target, unlearn how they measure, go back to old concepts like contextual or attribution models and other things, and try to usher them in a new world. And that's probably the most significant change we're going to see, and that the foundations of digital marketing are going to change. And we need an entirely new playbook.
Just a small ask of the industry. Mark, what about you?
No, I have to say, look, for Daniel was, both Stefan and Daniel were super insightful. And I'd have to say that, the one thing that maybe is not specifically on your list here, but plays into what Daniel just noted is this idea that the world has changed, right? And the way that people ingest media, both from the time shifting nature of no longer commuting, right? As well as the channel shifting towards spending more time with different types of apps. I don't think those habits are going to just go back to where they were. This idea that, we turn off the COVID clock and everyone just wakes up and gets back on the train and goes to work again exactly the same way that they did is over. And I don't think advertisers have fully recognized that yet. Drive time is no longer going to be what it was. Commuting time is going to change forever. The way people have time shifted what they're doing and where their attention is. I mean, I can tell you right now, there's people probably on this on this webinar that are multitasking in their homes with multiple different screens there, right? So if you're an advertiser, things like just viewability, they're great statistics, but measurement around engagement and true engagement and engagement at different times of the day is going to be very, very important towards that effectiveness number. So I think out of all of this, I still think we are absorbing the true behavioral changes in people and how they consume media, when they consume media, and what they consume. Hasn't fully been digested yet, and how that relates to actual engagement and attention will drive different levels of measurement, because performance is going to be determined by sales. But those old measurements of performance, I think, are going to be very different in a world where people are no longer focused on a device on a train. They're in their homes with 15 different devices going off at once. That always had been a challenge. But I think now it's going to become even a greater challenge for advertisers.
Yeah, some interesting results from our poll here. Some of the things that we just spoke about are definitely dominating the responses here. Continued growth in CTV in particular in the region at almost 40%. I think that's quite a lot. And then, as we spoke about just now, privacy restrictions and of course the ability to effectively target audiences are top of mind for our advertiser audience. So unfortunately, we're at time. So I think we'll only have time for one or two questions if you want to stay on. We do have a few from the audience. So the first one, Daniel, I think this refers back to something that you were saying earlier about, brands helping. What role do you think brands play in helping to defund misinformation and hate speech specifically? Stefan, do you want to talk to that, or Daniel, either of you?
Happy to start briefly. I mean, it has become a huge topic, very politically loaded topic, but it has exploded in the last 3 years. The issue is it's often subjective. What is misinformation, or what constitutes hate speech? The lines are very blurred. For brands, I think it's the new CSR to really try to curtail that. They need to be, I think, much more switched on when it comes to assessing where their media spend really goes. They need better reports and press their programmatic partners for better reports and to switch things off. It's devastating for a brand to be, called out by someone else that an ad is running somewhere. So they need to be much more proactive to really stop this from happening. But it's a massive macro cultural theme that might affect brand reputation. So I think it's an area where they should really double down on.
Stefan, anything to add there?
I'd say there is a wrong notion that advertisers are not doing much about it. I think advertisers are very much working on it. And I mean, since at the GroupM, I think we've been blocking disinformation domains by default for now 4 or 5 years. Obviously, that is work that keeps giving. The issue that we have with the disinformation and the difference between misinformation is that not always it's very clear. We don't have a clear definition what that is. But do advertisers have a bigger role to play? Yes, absolutely. By doing a bit more of due diligence, or their agencies doing it for them. But I must stress that this issue has been addressed for many months and years.
Yeah, I know we're a little over on time, but I think the next question is super relevant based on our last poll results. So I'm going to ask it if you don't mind staying on. So as money is continuing to increase in the CTV space, how much of an issue is fraud on CTV? And what about viewability and brand safety? Mark, do you want to start us off with that answer?
Yeah, I mean, look, just real quickly, we know that because of the, much higher CPMs and the higher quality of content that has attracted so many advertisers to CTV, it's also attracted fraudsters. If I can try to steal a 50-cent CPM or a $40 CPM, it's the same amount of work, right? So I might as well get a bigger bang for my buck. So we know that there's been an increasingly large number of fraud schemes heading towards CTV. That being said, it is still the fastest growing, at least in the Americas, advertising media that we've seen in a very long time, because of both the addressability, the quality of the audience, as well as the engagement. CTV is in someone's living room, and that there may be multitasking going, but it's usually being outshined by a 65-inch screen on the wall. So there's a huge amount of attraction there for advertisers. I think the key moving ahead as we look at not just wanting to get on the screen, but getting on the right content in the right context, is the opening up of the content providers to more what we call show level or program level data. That's a key aspect in both brand safety and driving more engagement for advertisers. Right now, in many cases, the demand so far outstrips the supply of quality CTV that advertisers are willing to take whatever they can get. I think that will change over time. But it certainly is an area which we're leading into as a company, which I think advertisers are leading into. And I think it will become much more of a global phenomenon over the next couple of years.
And based on the results of that poll, we can expect the increase in investment towards connected TV in EMEA, not just in North America. So very interesting. Well, I know we're over on time. Thank you, everyone who stayed on a little bit past our intended end time. I want to give a huge thanks and shout out to Stefan at GroupM and Daniel from IAB Europe, and Mark, I guess, thank you too, for a great discussion. I hope that everyone, I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. The session was recorded, if you haven't noticed, so it will be available for viewing at a later date. So let any of your colleagues know if they missed it. And shameless plug here as well. If you have not read our Global Insights report yet, you can download it from our site. So please check it out. There's a lot more information in there and benchmarks for all of our top EMEA countries. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day.